Hi everyone, this is Jim. Welcome to this Blitz chess postmortem video. This is a postmortem of my Blitz chess game number 159, where I was white and my opponent, I kicked off with d4 and my opponent played the old Indian defense. So let's take a look at that. d4, knight f6. So here you could be going into a King's Indian, a Grunfeld, a Nimzo Indian. All kinds of things are possible at this point. Here, let's put on a little sound. And he plays d6, and this is this is the signature move of the old Indian, which I wasn't aware of. I found that out looking it up later on Wikipedia. So, but the idea with the old Indian is to place your pawn here and your bishop here, as opposed to the King's Indian where the bishop would go to g7. So, pawn to e5 and bishop to e7. And you see this configuration showing up a little later. So it's not necessarily a bad opening. It looks like I'm playing normal moves here, and so is my opponent. And e4, maybe it's a little bit premature, but I was still thinking he might be going into some kind of King's Indian, so I was doing that. And then he plays e5, and oops, cancel that. He plays e5, and I recognize this as an old Indian. So I just wanted to say, let's see, before I continue with the game, this game makes a nice contrast to the previous game. So in 158, I was talking about how my opponent was playing in an overly aggressive fashion and how you can beat him back and get an advantage that way. And here, I guess this is a contrasting situation where my opponent was playing in an overly passive fashion and allows me to get an advantage in an attack because of that. So sort of the two ways you can go wrong in chess, being too aggressive or being too passive. d4 here, d5. I play d5, and that's maybe a bit of a mistake. It looks like it scores reasonably well, but that could just be an artifact of the database. Knight f3 is probably the main move, just defending there. It's just a bit premature to push this d5 here. You don't know where your opponent's pieces are all going, and you're fixing the center early on. And usually it's better to delay that and keep a little tension in the center and do this at a time when you're sure it's going to be advantageous. So the main black move here is probably knight c5, just immediately counterattacking on e5. And you have to defend. I can't kick this away with b4, for example. He's just going to grab there. And so that forces this pawn structure, and I've got a bad bishop here. And then he can play a5 to cement the knight in on c5. So that's the way that black should be playing this. Instead, he plays h6. And we're pretty much out of the opening book, so let's just look at the notation tab. I play h3 because I don't want his knight popping in here, and I'm going to play bishop to e3. He goes bishop e7. So this is the old Indian setup I was referring to, with the bishop on e7 and the pawn on e5. I go bishop e3. And he castles, and I play the move queen d2. And queen d2 is a bit of a mistake. And if you want to cover up the right side of the screen, the chess engine is giving away the move for black here. But if you want to look at this and consider what the move for black is and why that's an interesting move to play, this is a good tactics puzzle, I guess. Okay, I'll give away the first part of the answer. The knight takes e4 is what black should play here as the best move. And now think about, having given you that much of a hint, why don't you take another pause here and think about what's the follow-up? Why is that a good move? Okay, I'm going to give the answer away. Pause the video if you want to think about it. But yeah, you should have been able to spot that. After knight takes e4, okay, he's gained a pawn. I want to get my material back. He has the move f5, and that just drives my knight away. And after my knight retreats, he has the move f4. And actually, the chess engine trapping my bishop. That was the point. The bishop is trapped here. Has no squares. They're all covered by, and the queen is blocking his retreat. So it's all covered by black pieces. So black pawns. So black gets his piece back, and if we back up here, the best way to give the piece back is to play bishop d3, just continuing to develop, and giving black the choice of taking the knight or pushing on with the bishop. It looks like they're about the same. F takes e4, f4, all in the same. And so it's an equalizing transaction. Black has given a piece for a pawn, and then he wins the piece back, but he has to give up a pawn to get it. So materially it comes out about even, and it pretty much equalizes for black. So that's the best way to play for black at that point. Playing c6 here, which is what happened in the game, leaves white with some small edge. So I castle, and he plays rook e8. So I think there was still some stuff going on there that he could have taken advantage of. And I go king b1. Yeah, it's just calling out for c takes d5, which eventually gets played. So, and it looks to me like this idea of takes and takes is still on here, although it doesn't show up. Let's see, what's wrong with it at this point? Takes, takes, f4, knight takes d6, bishop takes. Okay, so that's after the move c6. There's this escape valve on d6, which looks pretty good. Okay, so that's why it no longer works at this point. I was just curious. So anyway, he played knight f8, and this is what I mean about passive moves. He hasn't really come forward with his pieces. He's been moving them back, and he's got a very quiet setup. And so your challenge is to try and find a way to break through and build up an attack. I'm naturally thinking about the move f4, but it doesn't quite work in a lot of these scenarios. So I hit on the plan of just continuing to defend this pawn. So at this particular point, if I play f4, he takes. He gets some immediate pressure on my e-pawn with the rook and the knight, although the bishop is in the way, so maybe it's playable. But I go for defending the pawn first. And now he puts some more pressure on the f4 square with his knight. So I build up with g3, queen c7, and now finally I get in the move f4. So this is what my play has been building up towards. And even here, the computer is very relaxed. But I would say as a human player, I would be starting to get nervous because this is looking kind of scary, this armada of pawns. And you'll see that black goes astray fairly shortly. So I guess the computer is looking far enough ahead, it sees that with precise play it can defend, but it gets trickier and trickier. So naturally you want to take back with the pawn here and not a piece. If you take back with a piece, it just gives them an opportunity to trade it off. And with the pawn here, you just control more space around the enemy king. So you often hear Chess Explained talking about, just grabbing space, and that's always a good idea if you can get away with it. But it's also important where the space is. If you can grab space near your opponent's king, if you grab space in the center, it gives you lots of piece flexibility. But if you grab space near your opponent's king, it can make it difficult for black to organize his defenses. And so that's why you want to grab with the pawn. And continuing that theme, it looks like c takes d5 is the best way to recapture. Again, keeping these pawns here and just controlling more space in the center and towards your opponent's king. I took back with the e-pawn, still with some advantage. Bishop d7, knight f3, just getting the rest of my pieces into the attack. Rook a c1, and now, yeah, suddenly the evaluation has shifted. So that seemingly innocuous move, rook a c1, and logical too. Black wants to get his counterattack going. But what's required here is some precise defensive moves, and this was his chance to play them. So the chess engine, well, its evaluation for white has increased somewhat, but it's recommending queen c8. Okay, maybe that would be reinforcing this diagonal here. Bishop to f8, reinforcing this diagonal here and the pawn in front of the king. A couple of ideas. Or b5. b5 seems like kind of a slow plan. I mean, I might just continue with rook a c8 anyway. But it does have the idea b5, b takes, c4, harassing my bishop. So I'm just curious about this. If b5, could I still play rook dg1 rather? I don't know, I said something else, but I was reading it rather than thinking. He can take. How about if I just retreat the bishop? I guess this buys him some time. Queen to b7. Now I play f5. Rook a b8. Ah, okay. So this that's the point of the b5 move as a defense. It allows a counterattack along the b file. Now I have to do something about this. Okay, so that is another way of defending. So he played rook a8, and it says I can play f5 immediately, but I played rook d to g1 first. Plays a6, and now I have hit on the idea of f5. So just clearing up another piece off of the G file and opening up this diagonal for the bishop. So all my pieces have sprung into life at this point, and in fact the attack is overwhelming. You can see what the evaluation goes to. So he's playing okay, one of the engine choices, maybe not the top one, but basically it's already hopeless. So I take off the knight because he was threatening to chop this bishop, and now I can take on h6 or on g7. It says I took on h6. Played bishop a8 now, but I calculated that I could still take on g7. Bishop takes, and then the queen comes out attacking the bishop and also the knight because the bishop is pinned. So I figured I was getting my material back, and yeah, it's one of the top choices. I could also have taken with the rook. Queen g5. So I calculated this part correctly, and now he could play king f8 and just give up the g7 pawn, g7 bishop. He tried knight h5, second choice, and I can just grab that, and the bishop is still pinned. And now he plays f6 because I'm threatening the move f6 myself to win another piece. But after f6, there is a mate in 5, so that was the question I left in the last video. Is there a forced mate at the end? And the answer is yes. But it's not the forced mate I thought, so I thought this was kind of instructive. I was thinking rook takes, king takes, and then rook over, and the king has to go to f8, and then queen to h8, and the king has to go to e7, and then rook to g7, and the king goes to d6, and then knight to e4 is mate, because the king on d6 has no squares to go to. The knight's taking away these two squares, pawns are taking away these two squares, and the rook is controlling that square. So that was the mate I was envisioning, but I missed the fact that the king can run away to d8. So here, let's put that on the board. Rook takes, which was played. If king takes, I was thinking rook here, king here, queen here, so this is all forced, king here, and rook here, and now the king just runs away to d8. So if he did, just to show you, if he did go here, then there's a mate in one with knight e4. So a very cute mate, because you're mating with the knight, and all your other pieces are controlling the squares around the king, and the king is here in the center. So a very attractive mate, but he doesn't have to go there, he can go here. And so after king d8, what's the best move? Just queen h6 or queen h7, just getting away from the attack of the rooks and continuing. So material-wise, queen, rook, and two pieces, queen, rook. So I'm down the exchange, but I have a passed pawn, and his king and his pieces are somewhat awkward. So still a winning advantage if you look at the computer evaluation, but not the mate. So let's back up and see if we can figure out the forced mate. So rook takes g7 as played. King takes g7 forced. So from here, there's a mate in 4. And yeah, I had started with this idea of queen g6, and I didn't see exactly how to continue. But queen g6, the king can go either to f8 or h8. And then I can put the rook over here. And then I thought, well, his bishop can just move out of the way, and he can guard, or he can lift a rook and guard along the second rank. But I missed the fact that the pawn on f6 is undefended. So really, this is the key idea here. So let's put a few of these moves on the board. Queen g6 check. But if you want a visualization exercise, you might want to pause the video and think about this, see if you can figure out the mating plans here. Okay, but I'm going to go ahead and walk through them. Okay, so let's try h8 first. Queen to h6 check. We back up. Rook g1, queen takes f6. Okay, these are all mates in 3, so this is just one of them. Queen to h6 check, king to g8. Now rook g1 check, king f7, and then there's a mate. So that's pretty straightforward. And so takes, king takes, queen here. So and there's two squares for the king to go to. So that was if he goes to h8. And it's always a trick to remember. You check again and then bring the rook in, and it forces him to the square f7, and then there's a mate with the queen on g7 because his escape squares are blocked. So when the king gets to f7 and you have your queen on g7, that's a mate. So he tries running the other way, and now you can take on f6 check, and he has to come back, and once again you have the rook g1 check, and the king only has one legal move, and queen g7 is mate once again. So it's just a good position to test your visualization skills here. Right here. Sack the rook on g7, and there's a forced mate. Okay, hope you guys enjoyed that. Nice contrast to the previous game. And leave any comments you have in the section below. See you again later. Bye.